Welcome back to a new episode of Ramblin' Parks. Here, noob edition with Petty Officer Squid Boy.
Morning.
Today, what we are going to do is we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into some carburetors that came off of this 750 Honda that we bought. And we're going to have to break this up a little bit. I'm going to tell you right now, we're just going to hit the highlights and the big stuff right now on these. But there's going to be a separate video coming out very shortly that is going to categorize the whole process from start to finish. And it'll follow along. Now, I'm going to warn you, it's going to be long, but there's a lot of info there that, is very relevant and it's very pertinent, not only to this model in particular, but also basic practices for virtually any carburetor rebuild on a motorcycle. But for this video and for time purposes, like I said, we're just kind of hitting the high points here, folks. Now, full disclosure and disclaimer here. Obviously, follow basic safety practices, okay? iPro, don't snort carburetor cleaner, that's bad. Don't get it in your eyes, it stinks. Trust me, I know. There may be some points in this video where you see me doing something that common sense would say is not good. Use your own discretion there, okay? So there, you've been disclaimed. Starting out on this, what we have to do, we've got some nasty, yucky, grody carbs. We're going to fix that. We've got to get all the external stuff off, like the vent lines, the choke, the fuel supply lines, things like that. That way we can get down to the meat and taters of the carburetors themselves. Then we got to blow all that apart, and we got to clean it up and make it pretty, inside and out. Honestly, I don't give a crap what the outside looks like. I'm worried about what the inside looks like, because that's where the magic happens. That's where the dinosaur juice gets, transformed into the whole potato noise that makes a motorcycle go forward. What I want you to do is grab those needle nose and these vent lines here. Let's pull those off, and let me show you something real quick. Like these little springy clips like that, if you pinch them and kind of twist your pliers off to the side and just kind of roll your wrist, you can grab them and walk them up off of there like so. You got to squeeze it and then roll them over while you're squeezing it to where you can hold it spread open.
Okay.
But these here, you need to be careful of, because they are plastic, they are brittle, they will break. The fuel line that slips over a metal spigot. Now, on any of this rubber hose that's been stuck on here for a long time, and you guys out there, pay attention to this, okay? Any of this stuff where you've got a fuel line that's been on here for a long time, it's going to be stuck on there. What will help you get that removed after you get the clamp off, whatever kind of clamp it may have, take it, grab it, kind of rock it back and forth a little bit and give it a little twist, because that rubber will kind of grow onto the fuel fitting or the fuel pipe or the vacuum fitting, whatever the case may be. Now, this in particular, this stuff is rotten, and this fuel line is coming apart. So we're going to go with the nuclear option here. Grab that razor blade. Run you a little bit of it out, and then just take it and slice it down the side there. You'll feel it when you get there. You'll feel it scratching on that fitting a little.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay, now, grab one of those picks, preferably that one with a little crook in it. Stick it down in that slice that you just made, and dig that stuff off of there. This is going around a round piece of pipe. So you take that pick, put it in, and just follow the curve around. Stick it down underneath there, and there, it's loose. Now, we don't care about that piece of hose on there. It's going to go away, and it's getting a replacement. But this little plastic T here, where the hoses split off and go from one carburetor to another, that's plastic, so it's going to be brittle. You got to reuse that, and you need to be careful around that so it doesn't get broke. Go ahead, pull that other fuel line off, and you can just bend these up out of the way. Pull that other hose off to where we can just take that whole assembly off and lay it off to the side. That way we've got a template to go off of whenever we're making up new fuel lines. We can measure out for how long it's got to be, where it's got to route, also, what angle it's got to be at. That way it doesn't get hung up with everything else. Pro tip here, well, semi-pro, actually rank amateur. Bumpkin tip, let's put it that way. You know the little red straw that comes on a can of carburetor cleaner, and you know how you're always searching for that because it vanishes? Take a razor blade, cut that sucker in half. Now, the half that you're not using right now, you put that wherever you want to for safekeeping, where honestly you're probably going to forget about it. At least that's what I do. But you take your abbreviated straw and you put that into your carb cleaner. Not only do you have better control over where it's going because it's not real limber and flexible and bendy all over the place, but it's not sticking out there to get knocked off whenever you set it aside or you're working around it doing something else. Kind of at the point right now where I really don't care what happens to that clamp, just as long as it gets out of my way. Honda gonna Honda.
What exactly is the purpose of the strain shrink?
Well, what it does is your bike's got a fuel pump, so
Right.
it's got pressurized fuel coming in the carburetors. This, since that route's at a fairly contorted angle, that spring, slides over the outside, and basically it helps the hose hold its shape. That way, it doesn't fold over and pinch whenever it gets hot from engine heat.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah, that's that forbidden Kool-Aid. Yeah, the green stuff that's coming out of there. Once upon a time, that used to be gas. Used to be.
Forbidden Gatorade.
Yeah, don't drink it. Well, let's put it this way. If you want to push the factory reset button on your digestive system, yeah, sure, go ahead and drink it, but I don't recommend. 0 of 5 stars. Remember that whole disclaimer at the first part of this video? Yeah, it's stuff like that. So let's get that off there. And that's just a vent hose, but we may clean that up and reuse it. We may replace it. We don't know. It just kind of depends on what kind of shape it's in internally. Now, this is where a lot of people screw up and a lot of people break things. The chokes on these, where the cable goes in, it's got a splitter where it connects one cable into two because you've got two individual choke plungers that go into the carb bodies. Now, these fittings where the chokes screw into the carb bodies, or technically enrichers, because that's what they are, these are plastic. They're real delicate. They're real brittle. So no Conan here. A little bit of finesse. What I like to do is I will take these and take a pick and get up underneath the edge of that little rubber boot, like so, and slip that rubber boot up because the enricher plunger is on a spring, and you can see how I'm moving it, in and out there. Now that I got the rubber boot off of the little ridge on that choke nut. That plastic choke nut is the one thing that will make or break a easy job and turn it into a hideous job if you're having to wait on parts. So what I'll do, take that rubber boot, pull it back, and then take some needle nose pliers and very gently grab the flats on that choke nut because it's got wrench flats on it. Just spin it to where you can just get it moving because they don't thread in very tight at all. I mean, they're literally finger tight. Get it moving, and while you pull that back, pinch it between your thumb and your finger and go ahead and spin that little guy out like I'm doing right now. That way you can pull it out and you don't have to worry about damaging anything. It's a good idea when you got your carbs sitting on the bench, shoot a bunch of pictures of them when they're assembled from different angles, different points of view. That way you've got that to fall back on as a reference later on down the road whenever you're sitting there going, where'd that go? It's a good fallback plan to have. Let's get that off there. So now we got that off. We're just going to set this aside because really there's not a whole lot you got to do with these. If you got an older bike where it's kind of crusty, it may not be a terrible idea to shoot a little bit of lube down these cables and just work them back and forth. But for the most part, they either work or they don't. And now we start taking all the blood and guts out. Now, this is where it pays to have a decent amount of area and lay down, old towel, or like in our case, we got a couple of old shop rags here that we got held down with some magnets just to hold everything in place. You don't want to do this kind of work on top of something that's hard surface, like a coffee table, kitchen table, 2 reasons. Primarily, number one, significant other, beloved wife, unit, life partner, or whatever your situation may be. If they catch you doing that, they're probably going to have words with you, and they ain't going to be pleasant. Number two, if you've got something that's really, really tiny and really, really hard, like, say, a pilot jet, a screw, itty-bitty little C-clip that likes to disappear off into the ether, and you drop it on something hard, guess what? They bounce, like flubber level of bounce.
Yeah.
If you have a towel down, it keeps it from trying to go into orbit on you, and that way you can find all your parts. So normally we would use just a plain old Mod 1 Mark O screwdriver for doing this. Make sure you got an appropriate size bit in there. It's a number 2 JIS for the most part, not a number 2 Phillips. The difference between the two of them is primarily in the flutes of the bit itself. JIS stands for Japanese Industrial Standard, and the angle that these flutes are machined is very slightly different. Now, can you use a number 2 screwdriver on a number 2 JIS? Yeah, sure. People have been doing it from, since the dawn of time, and I'm going to be doing it here in just a minute because, like Bonehead, I forgot my JIS screwdrivers at work. The only way that you're going to do that is, number 1, have a screwdriver where the tip's not all butchered up and rounded off like this one is, because, this is one of the little cheapy screwdrivers that Harbor Freight used to give away for free. Remember back in the good old days when we had coupons? Yeah. It's that old. What you can do is get you by the DeWalt. The DeWalt and Makita brand impact driver bits, the ones that's got the little skinny bottleneck in them like that. The surface finish that they put on these things, they put a blasted finish on there, and what it does, it gets down into the valley of that screw, and it kind of grabs it from the side a little bit just because it's a little bit rough. That'll help you out. If you're planning on doing carburetors and you can't nail down a JIS bit, go to Lowe's, Home Depot, something like that. Get you a couple of these little impact driver bits. It'll get you by. Normally, normal people, normal's a relative term. Let's be real here, folks. But anyway.
No, you're weird.
No, it's okay.
You're just weird.
We're adults here. You can buy beer now, okay? Just, keep it clean. Your grandmama watches this stuff, all right? She does. Hi, Mom. Not your proudest moment, I know, but I'm trying. I promise I am. Anyways, that's what I use at work. Now, I use a smaller 12-volt version of this rigid impact driver, and I've been using it for a very long time, just like that one. So I'm used to it. I know when to quit. If this is the first time you guys are diving into a set of carbs, don't use power tools. Use a screwdriver, because until you are extremely familiar and extremely comfortable with the tool that you're using, you're probably going to break some stuff really fast. What I like to do is, whatever I'm using, I like to use a bit of an extension on there instead of just having the bit right up on the tool, because that way it gives me a little separation, and not only can I see what I'm doing better, I can also maneuver around in some of the nooks and crannies whenever I need to. We're going to start from the top of the carburetor and work our way down. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the carb caps off. That way we can get the slides, the diaphragms, the springs, all that stuff out of there, because you need to set that stuff aside because it is delicate. That diaphragm, it's just a little thin rubber membrane, and it's very easily damaged and very easily torn. Do not get carburetor cleaner on the slide diaphragms, because that stuff soaks into the rubber and it swells up and it looks like a mutant gummy bear. Before you pull that last screw out of the carb cap, it's a good idea to grab a hold of it, put your thumb on it, whatever, because that spring on some carburetors can be rather energetic, and if you're not expecting it, it can surprise the crap out of you, or worse, it can shoot parts across the shop, and then you're crawling around on your hands and knees with a flashlight for the next 4 hours. But what I'll do is, there's that carb cap, there's its slide spring, there's its screws, here's the slide. I'm going to pull this out of here, being gentle, and I'm going to set all that stuff aside where it's all grouped together where it came from. Now, you'll notice on this how that diaphragm is kind of wrinkled up. That's a non-issue. That's not a problem. That's not a defect. But what you do want to do is hold these up to some daylight and just pull the wrinkle out of it and just barely stretch it any at all. Just barely pull on it enough just to stretch the rubber just a tiny bit. And you're looking for any small pinholes or tears, because if you have any damage on that slide diaphragm at all, it won't allow it to seal against the vacuum that this slide is depending on above it to be able to lift it and make it do its job. When I'm setting slides aside, what I'll do is I'll take the rubber and roll it down like that, and it'll stay put like that, but I prefer to do it that way. That way I can just set them right there like that, and I don't have to worry about them laying on the side or anything like that. And that way it doesn't deform that rubber.
Right. So you turn it into a little mushroom.
Ish. It's a cosplay mushroom. It's practicing. On these Honda carbs, the way the needle is retained in the slide, they have an itty bitty little spring and a really tiny little plastic retainer, and you got to push it down with a Phillips screwdriver and then rotate it to where it'll unlock it, because it rotates and locks into three little tabs down in the bottom of that slide. And if you guys notice right there, that spring is really, really small. Again, you don't want to have to go chasing that thing down. Here's a problem though. If you guys have seen me doing carburetor stuff before, you know where I'm going with this. This is a factory jet needle. See how it looks just like a nail? So this bike's got exhaust on it. It had a allegedly high flow air filter kit, but it really wasn't. Yeah. But we got stock needles in this thing. Now I know somebody's been into these carbs before, but with this thing having stock needles, I'm willing to bet this thing has still got stock carb jets in it. It hasn't had a jet kit put in there. Anytime you do a high flow exhaust and a high flow air filter, you really need to rejet the carbs. I'm not necessarily saying that you have to buy an aftermarket jet kit, but it does make things a whole lot simpler for you. We're going to have to order a jet kit for this, so we're going to follow up with the final assembly on this in a separate video, just to kind of recap on what we're doing here today.
Okay.
But for the meantime, we're going to set that little guy aside, and then we're doing the same thing to his neighbor.
Oh, looks like we're good there.
Okay, we'll go ahead and pop the needle out of that one.
We'll use this one, right?
Yeah. Put it in there and push it down, and you see how it releases?
Yeah.
Now you can just turn it upside down and dump it out into your hand. And that's the little spring that likes to go into orbit and go on walkabout. Since we took half of them out, we're going to go ahead and pull the air cut diaphragms out of these. Now these you definitely want to keep a hand on, because the spring in these is definitely springy, and it will shoot stuff across the shop on you.
Especially hostile.
Not hostile, just short fused.
Oh, there's a short spring.
Why is it all the short people that's got anger issues and they tend to react violently?
Because they're closer to hell.
Oh, like your sister. Got it. She's a midget, y'all. I mean, she ain't got papers, but she's short. Like, short.
Like she could pass for a hobbit.
Don't talk about her hairy toes, man. You know how she gets about that. But you see how that diaphragm is stuck to that cover? A lot of times I pull them out that way. Just catch the edge of it with your thumbnail and start working it loose. It's still got that spring pushing against it. You just got to be careful not to tear that diaphragm, because these diaphragms are in good shape, and even though they'll stick to that cover, the rubber itself isn't degraded or broken down, and I can't see any legitimate need to replace them, and I don't want to have to replace them because I got ham-fisted with them and tore them up. While we're here, let's go ahead and take our idle adjustment screw off the side of the carburetor to where it doesn't get bent if something gets banged into it or something gets dropped. Okay, before we start opening up the carburetors and getting into the meat and taters of things, we're going to go ahead and pull the idle mixture screws out of the carb bodies. Now, these guys are small. They're real small, and they're brass. That means they're real delicate. So what I do on them, I've got a screwdriver bit here that I kind of profiled down in the lathe to where I can get down in there. You need a very small flat blade screwdriver, but you want to make sure that it engages in the slot head of the screw itself first. This is where it pays to have your rebuild kit before you start diving into the carburetors. If you're not very familiar with this stuff, or if you haven't done it before, it'll have a new idle mixture screw in your rebuild kit. Now would be a good time to take that. If you don't have a screwdriver that fits it properly, if it's too small and it fits real loose and it wobbles around, go buy a screwdriver that fits before you start taking these things out. That way you don't booger them up and end up having to figure out how to dig them out of the carb body after you strip the head out of them. Yeah, it ain't no fun, and especially on these. They're a very fine thread screw, and they're very shallow threads, so it's real easily damaged. Now, you notice down there where it's got a bunch of funk and schmooze down in that cavity?
Mm-hmm.
What I do before I pull these out is just give them a quick little blast of carb cleaner to let it soften up any crap that may be down inside there. And if it's real bad, I'll take a can of compressed air, like computer duster, or, at the shop, I'll take a air hose. Wait a minute, air hose. That's something that we did the other night. Oh, yeah. Grab me an air hose. Air hose. The hose doesn't leak, but the blower does. Your days are numbered. Just give it a little shot, and then we're going to unplug that. And that'll find its way into a recycling bin here very shortly. But give it a shot of air. Give it a shot of carb clean just to soften up the gunk. And then take your appropriately sized screwdriver and back the screws out. There. Okay, now, big mystery time here. We got a screw, and I'm going to show my other camera here, that way y'all can see it. But we got a screw, and it's got a spring that came out with it. The problem is we still have a very thin little flat washer and a very thin little bitty O-ring that's stuck up in that carb body. We got to get them out of there. Take a sacrificial paper clip, sheetrock screw, which is what I'm using right here. Don't screw the screw in there. Be very careful. This is very delicate. But you can take that screw, put it down inside there, and just give it a little tiny twist, about a quarter of a turn. If you're living right and the planets align, it'll grab that washer and that O-ring, and it's not. My screw end's defective.
Oh, you're getting old.
Ain't that damn old. She'll attest to that. Sorry, folks, slight pause here. I cannot stand this indeterminate silence out here in the shop. I got to throw some tunes on, okay? Whenever we're in the shop, usually we're jamming out, because we're kind of in the groove. So I got this little cheap chintzy Harbor Freight pick. It volunteered as tribute, so I'm going to see if I can use this for digging these O-rings out of here. Oh, yeah, that works real well. So we got that little bitty dinky flat washer right there, and then underneath there, we will have a little bitty rinky dink O-ring. When you're taking these apart, you should have your idle mix screw itself, little tiny spring, and then there'll be a flat washer and the aforementioned itty bitty little tiny O-ring. You got to make sure you got all four pieces of that out of there. The sticky icky from all the broke down fuel and all the funk that's in there has got it stuck in there. So we have to encourage it to come out.
All the deader dino juice.
This is not something you can cut corners with.
Oh, spring just decided to play hooky.
No, it's still in there. Here, you dig it out.
All right.
You talk a good game. You get him out of there.
Oh, they pack it reversed?
No, there's no washer in there. This is a prime example of when somebody screwed up. They lost the washer whenever somebody was in these carbs previously, and they had the spring butted up directly against the O-ring. That's bad because that O-ring can't seal properly. Good thing we got new stuff to go back in there with. All right. So now we got to open up the blood and guts of it. Let's pull the bowls off. Now, if you've got drain screws on the float bowls like these do yourself a favor and go ahead and pull the drain screws out of the bowls now, because it's a lot easier to get these things out and have something to get a hold of to where you got a little extra leverage while the bowls are on the carburetors, as opposed to being loose and just flopping around on the bench. Now, another thing I'd like to point out on these carburetors, if you notice, this float bowl drain points straight out to the side. This one angles this way. They are cylinder and side specific. Remember when I was telling you guys about taking pictures of your stuff before you blew it all apart? This is a good reason why. Because the way these carbs sit in this bike, you can swap float bowls from one carburetor body to the other, but later on down the road when the carbs are on the bike, if you ever need to drain the float bowls, you ain't going to be able to get to the screws. Now, I'm just laying all these screws off to the side because I've done enough of these to know where they go back. They are going to be different lengths, And if you put the wrong link screw in the wrong spot, you can damage something. Something that helps a lot of people if they're if you're new to the carburetor game, something that helps out quite a bit, go to the kitchen, go rob an egg crate out of the fridge. The little cavities, in your egg carton, just take a Sharpie and mark on there float bowl screws, carb top screws, whatever. Put them each in their own little group. That way you can keep track of them and you can make sure they're going back in the right spot whenever you go back together with all of it.
So not what we're doing.
Not what we're doing because I'm a semi-trained unprofessional. Now we got to get the float out. Now that float pin just slips in. It doesn't press in. It doesn't drive in, nothing like that. You just got to slide the little guy out to the side, and then you can lift your float assembly with float needle out of there. Be gentle with these things because there is an adjustment on this float. That little middle tab right there, apparently somebody else has already had their dick beaters in the middle of these things. Again, correctly fitting screwdriver. The jets themselves are brass, and brass is delicate, and brass is brittle. It likes to break. A lot of times, whenever you break the jets loose, if you look close, you can see that jet holder, or a lot of people call it an emulsion tube. It's spun the whole thing out. So we've still got to get the jet out of the emulsion tube. So once you break it loose, just take a wrench that fits it or a small crescent wrench and grab it on the flats to where you can hold it, and then break your jet loose. And then you can take that out. It makes it a whole lot easier if you do it while it's still in the carburetor body because it's a whole lot easier to hang on to. That's got some funk growing on it that you ain't going to wash off with lava soap and an SOS pad. But we're going to do it anyway because we're reusing these things. We're going to have to spend a little time cleaning those up, make sure they're cleared out. The threads on the pilot jet are very small, they're very delicate, and I guarantee you that that thing is clogged up like a toilet at the end of the Texas chili cook-off. And then lastly, you have to get your float seat out of the main body. Now, this is a very delicate part, and I want to show it to you guys. You notice these two posts right here? Those are cast as part of the carburetor body, and that's where your float pin slips through and your float pivots on. You want to be extremely careful with these to not hit them because they will break off fairly easily. Don't try to use a wrench on these. Get a socket, and a socket that fits right. In this case, it's 10 millimeter. Here's our float seat, and here's our float needle. Now, if you notice, that float needle has a little tapered rubber tip to it, and how it works, that slips up inside there, and there's a machine to hold that rubber tip seats in. When the float drops down, it allows fuel into the carburetor, and when the float floats up to a certain height, it pushes it up against it, and that's what stops the flow of fuel. Now, that's gross. You guys can see all the residue and funk inside that float bowl now that the fuel is dried out of it. That looks like something you'd scrape off the floor of a New York taxi cab. That's what happens when you let fuel sit in your bike too long. Hence the whole ran when parked, because it may have ran when it was parked, but it ain't going to run right now. All right. Here, you do the second one. Ah!
Nice try.
So serious, it doesn't work on him.
I got to work under pressure.
I see what you did there, submariners. But it's in pretty much the same shape. It's just a little bit different shade of funk it's in there. That one's rusty red, whereas the other one was sinus infection green. Let's set this aside, that way you got room to move.
No sloshing in that.
Sonar can't hear nothing. There ain't nothing in there. You guys have heard this before, but the thing is, him and his sister, they don't know shit from Shinola about working on a motorcycle, because I didn't push them in that direction when they were young. I let them do their own thing, and I encouraged them to do their own thing. Honestly, I wanted a better life for both of them, and they've both turned out pretty damn good, if you ask me. We got our carbs gutted. They're totally broke down. On this particular bike, there is no need to go any further with splitting the rack, so to speak. A lot of people get nervous about that. We can clean everything that we need to clean and get it cleaned properly without having to do that on these, because These carburetors have individual fuel lines that run into each one that supplies fuel to them. They don't have a connecting tube that has O-rings or seals on it that slips into the side where the rack has to be split apart to be able to get that out for service.
Right.
So we are stopping at this point right here on these carbs. Okay, so let's talk cleaning. What are we going to do with them now? They don't go in the washing machine. Dishwasher, that's a no-no. Your mama will get mad.
Yeah.
Now, I know a lot of you guys, you're doing this bare bones, and you got to do what you got to do, and I respect that and I understand that. You got to get it functionally clean. If there's a passage where air or fuel flows through it, it's got to be clean, it's got to be clear, and it's got to be unobstructed. Every carburetor has to be able to flow the same amount of fuel and air through all of its various passages and circuits. And how you ensure that is you make damn good and sure that you have everything as clean as possible. Now, does it have to be bright and sparkly? No, it doesn't. But it's got to be functionally clean to where everything can move through in the areas that it's supposed to move through at. Here's what we're going to do with this. The big pieces, the carb main bodies themselves, the bowls, the carb caps themselves, and also these air cut diaphragm covers, they're big enough to where they're not going to get lost in the blasting cabinet whenever we soda blast these. Now, what I found as a simple solution is these little small mesh ultrasonic cleaner baskets that I got off Amazon. And I bought a 3-pack of them. This is the biggest of the 3, but I'm going to show you on the other camera here. You see how fine that wire mesh is? I mean, you can see through it. And it's very, very tiny. But it's small enough to where it's going to contain all your parts, but it still allows soda to flow through when you got it in the blaster to where it can get in there, clean, and do its job. But what we're going to do is we're going to take all of our small parts like jets, emulsion tubes, the float pivot pins, screws, the float bowl drain screws. We're going to go ahead and take those O-rings off of there now. If I can hook it without stabbing myself. That way the blast will get in there in that O-ring groove and clean that out while we're doing this. The float seats, I don't worry about those because those are going to be replaced. It's irrelevant. It's kind of pointless to clean them. So the main thing is, you know, your emulsion tubes, float pivot pins, jets, screws, nuts, various hardware. You know, if you want it to be clean and sparkly, put it in here. Now, I know I said that I wasn't going to put these air cut diaphragm covers in here, but hey, let's go ahead and do it because, you know, it's that much less that we got to keep track of inside the cabinet, you know. Now, when it comes to the carb caps themselves, that spring and that plastic retainer, we are leaving those things sitting over on the side. They are not going to go anywhere near that blast cabinet because they will disappear into the ether. Same for you and your buddy. Now, just to give you guys a heads up, the jet needles on the slides, I never put these in here. I always clean these by hand because these have both a dimensional tolerance for the diameter and they also have a taper tolerance on them for both the length and the diameter of that taper at a given point on the needle, and that's very critical. If you scratch it, bend it, gouge it, whatever, it's not going to flow right. Plus also, these are stock needles. These ain't going back in here, and they may transcend into a different / former life because they look like a nail. They may get used as a nail.
Nail's a nail, and we got a hammer.
Hammers we got. Let's get the last of our screws here, and we're going to go ahead and put those little hold down tabs from the air supply tubes in there while we're at it. Now, lastly, the idle mixture screws themselves. No, don't do it. Bad juju. Couple reasons. Number one, you got new ones in your carb kit. Number two, if you look really close on my other camera here, you see that little tiny taper tip to it? That thing is small, y'all. I mean, that thing is not even a half a millimeter around. So it's real tiny, it's real bendy, and this is brass. Brass don't like to bend. It likes to break. Bad news. Don't try it. If you got to clean those, do it by hand. Spritz a little carb cleaner on a rag. Be very gentle. Just twist it back and forth, to where you can basically wipe the funk off of them. But don't do any kind of aggressive cleaning methods like this to them because it'll destroy them, and it'll do it real fast. Okay, so those little guys are all held captive now. Okay, we're going to take a slight break here to where we can reset just a little bit because Petty Officer Squid Boy here and his mama have a prior engagement they've got to go to. And also, my blast cabinet, it's not anywhere near as big as the one that I've got at work. It's small. I'm wider than my blast cabinet on most days. But if I'm not, get me a sandwich. But anyway, what I'm saying is there's not a whole hell of a lot of room, and I want to take you guys for a ride with me. So he's going to step aside for a minute while I show you guys how this works and how effective it works. So be right back. See you in a minute. Hey, y'all. I want to jump in here real quick and kind of apologize to you. I know this video is kind of dragging out and getting long, and for that, I'm sorry. But the thing is, there's a lot of good information here that I personally feel like needs to be explained in, some decent detail because we got a lot of people that join us for these videos and they've never been into a carburetor before. My main goal with these videos is to educate and also to help people understand how this part and this part and this part and this part all come together and work. And unfortunately, that takes time. Now, that being said, how we're going to deal with this is we're going to split this video into two halves. The other half of this is going to have the cleaning process and also the reassembly process to where we can get the carbs together and put them back on the bike, okay? Now, we'll have that for a brand new episode of Ramblin' Park this coming Monday, and you guys are going to be able to follow along with us. I'm still going to make a full-length, big, it's going to be big, fair warning, y'all. Bring a bag of cheese puffs and a pillow to sit on because you're going to be there for a while. But I am going to put a full-length version of this video up there to where whenever you guys have time or if you have the inclination, you can follow along step by step by step, and you can see what all is actually involved in doing this job from start to finish. And that way you may get a little bit better understanding of not only the steps involved to do the job successfully, but what pitfalls to avoid. Also, for you guys that are on the Patreon already, please, I need to know if you guys want to do something with what we were talking about the other day. I don't want to talk about it here. But if you're not on the Patreon, why not? It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. Come on over. Hang out. It's a cool place. We've got a lot of cool people. Some cooler than others because I'm kind of on the lower end of the spectrum there. I'm just a guy that, stands in front of a camera and makes off-key remarks and tries to share a little bit of brain space with you guys. Until next week, y'all, I love you. I look forward to seeing you in the comments. Look forward to seeing you over on the Patreon where we can kick back and forth and talk about stuff, and I can post some stuff up over there that I can't share here. Let's have fun with it, okay?